It started with a sentence so simple that I almost ignored it. My wife was standing in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, when she said casually, "Oh, by the way, my coworker is coming over for dinner tonight." There was no pause, no hesitation, no change in her tone. Just another sentence. Like she was telling me we were out of milk. I looked up from my phone and said, "Your coworker?" "Yeah," she replied. "From work." I nodded slowly. At first, it didn't feel like anything. We had guests before. Friends. Colleagues. Family. But something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me. Not what she said, but how she said it. Too normal. Too prepared. Like this decision had already been made long before I was informed. I asked, "What's his name?" She hesitated. Just for half a second. Then she said, "Adam." That was the moment my chest tightened. Adam. I hadn't heard that name in years. Not since the early days of our relationship. Not since the stories she used to tell me about her college life. Not since the day she said, "He was my first real love, but it's over." Adam wasn't just a coworker. Adam was her ex. I tried not to react. I told myself maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe there were two Adams. Maybe this Adam was someone else. So I asked, very calmly, "Adam who?" She avoided my eyes and said, "Just Adam. He works in my department." That didn't answer my question. My mind started replaying old conversations. Her saying, "We dated for 2 years." Her saying, "It ended badly." Her saying, "We don't talk anymore." Yet here he was. Coming to my house. For dinner. I felt something move inside me, not anger, not jealousy, but something heavier. Discomfort. Because if it was truly innocent, why didn't she tell me earlier? Why not say, "Hey, my ex works with me now," when she first got that job? Why not say, "You might meet him someday"? Why did I find out only when he was about to walk through my front door? I didn't confront her. Not yet. I watched her instead. She moved around the kitchen with unusual energy. She cared about how the table looked. She changed clothes twice. She put on makeup she normally only wore when we went out. And that's when I knew. This dinner mattered. Not to me. Not to us. To her. I went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I told myself not to overthink. But overthinking is what happens when someone gives you half the truth. I thought about trust. About how fragile it is. Not because people lie, but because people hide. I remembered how she once told me, emotional honesty matters more than physical loyalty. I wondered if she remembered that too. I went back to the kitchen and said, "So, how long have you and Adam been working together?" She said, "A few months." A few months. And this was the first I was hearing of him. I smiled slightly and said, "Interesting." She didn't notice the tone. She was too busy preparing. Too busy caring. Too busy thinking about him. The doorbell rang an hour later. She almost rushed to it. That hurt more than I expected. Not because she was excited to see him, but because she wasn't excited to see me like that anymore. Before she opened the door, I said quietly, "You never told me your ex works with you." She froze. Just for a second. Then she laughed lightly and said, "Oh, I didn't think it mattered." That sentence stayed with me. I didn't think it mattered. That's how emotional lines get crossed. Not with intention, but with permission. Adam walked in smiling. Confident. Comfortable. Familiar. Like someone who knew he wasn't a stranger. Like someone who believed he still belonged somewhere in her life. And maybe, he did. But that place should never have been my home. As they hugged hello, not a long hug, not an inappropriate one, just familiar enough to hurt. And I realized something important. This story wasn't about a man coming for dinner. It was about a woman opening a door she should have kept closed. Not physically. Emotionally. And I was standing right there, watching it happen. Not angry. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just aware. Because once you see the moment, respect starts to fade. You never forget it. And that was only the beginning. Adam didn't enter my home like a guest. He entered like a memory that never really left. He smiled when he saw my wife. A soft, familiar smile. Not the polite one you give strangers, the one you give people who already know you. "Hey, Sarah," he said. Not "nice to meet you," not "thank you for inviting me." Just "hey." Like this was normal. Like this had happened before. My wife's face changed when she saw him. Not dramatically. Just enough. Her shoulders relaxed. Her eyes softened. Her voice lifted. It was subtle. But it was real. And it wasn't for me. I stepped forward and said, "I'm her husband." He shook my hand and smiled politely. "Adam." As if I didn't already know. As if he hadn't been living rent-free in the back of my mind since morning. We sat down. The food was good. The table was warm. The lighting was soft. Everything was perfect. Except the energy. They talked like two people continuing a conversation that had never ended. Office jokes I didn't understand. Stories I wasn't part of. Moments they remembered together that I had no access to. "Do you remember when?" "Oh my God, yes, and then you said." They laughed. I smiled. I felt invisible. Not ignored, that would have been obvious. Invisible is worse. Because invisibility means you're present, but unnecessary. At one point Adam said, "You still cook the same way." She laughed and said, "Some habits never die." I wondered if feelings worked the same way. He complimented the house. The food. Her taste. He never crossed a physical line. That's what made it dangerous. Because nothing he did was wrong enough to stop. And everything he did was wrong enough to feel. He looked at her when she spoke. Not casually, attentively. He listened. Not because he was polite, but because he cared. And that's the kind of attention people crave. Especially when life becomes routine. Especially when marriage becomes predictable. Especially when passion turns into partnership. And partnership, as beautiful as it is, doesn't always feel exciting. I watched her lean into the conversation. Laugh a little louder. Explain things a little more. Care a little deeper. Not because she was flirting, but because she was remembering who she used to be. And Adam was the mirror reflecting that version back to her. I felt something heavy in my chest. Not jealousy. Grief. Because I realized I wasn't losing her to another man. I was losing her to her past. And the past is powerful. Because it doesn't carry bills. Or stress. Or responsibilities. The past only carries feelings. And feelings are addictive. At one point I excused myself and went to the kitchen. I needed space. Not because I was angry, but because I was shrinking. In my own house. I leaned against the counter and listened to their laughter from the other room. And I asked myself a question I never thought I'd have to ask. When did I become the third person in my own marriage? I went back and joined them. But I had changed. I stopped trying to be interesting. Stopped trying to compete. Stopped trying to matter. I just watched. And when you watch long enough, you see the truth. Not the truth people say. The truth people show. Adam wasn't trying to steal my wife. He didn't need to. She was slowly handing pieces of herself back to a version of her life that no longer existed. That's what emotional cheating is. Not betrayal. But transfer. The transfer of emotional energy away from where it belongs. The dinner ended politely. Hugs. Thank yous. Smiles. Adam left. But the echo of him stayed. My wife was quiet afterward. Thoughtful. Somewhere else. I asked, "Nice guy?" She said, "Yeah, he's always been kind." Always. That word again. Not he is. But he has always been. That's when I understood something crucial. Adam wasn't a guest. He was a reopened door. And doors that reopen never do so quietly. They make noise in the soul. Later that night she said, "It was just dinner. You're overthinking." I nodded. Because sometimes people need denial more than truth. But I knew. Dinner wasn't the problem. The connection was. And connection, once activated, doesn't fade on its own. It grows. Unless someone stops it. And that someone was me. But not the way you think. Not with anger. Not with accusations. Not with control. But with something far more powerful. Clarity. And that's when I made my decision. The next morning, the house felt heavier than usual. The laughter, the voices, the subtle intimacy from the previous night lingered like smoke you can't blow away. I woke up early. Coffee in hand, I sat in the living room, watching the sunlight spill across the floor. My mind kept replaying every detail from dinner. Every laugh, every glance, every subtle movement. Adam had left physically, but he hadn't left my head. And then, I realized something very important. It wasn't about Adam. It was about balance. The scales had tilted overnight. My wife's energy, her attention, her small spark had shifted toward a part of her past. And if left unchecked, that shift would become a permanent imbalance in our home. I didn't want confrontation. I didn't want anger. I didn't want drama. I wanted truth, clarity, perspective. And there was only one way to achieve that. Adam was married. His wife was pregnant. And I knew her name, Emily. She was the key. Because sometimes, when someone drifts emotionally toward a memory, the only thing that can pull them back is the reality of their choices. I took out my phone and typed a message I didn't know if I'd send. "Hi Emily, this is Mike. I'm Sarah's husband. We had dinner with Adam last night, and I realized you might want to join us for a dinner sometime. It's important you see the situation. Let me know if you'd like to come." I paused. Read it again. Deleted a sentence. Added another. No pressure. Just transparency. I pressed send. The message lingered in the chat bubble for what felt like an eternity. Then, the tiny notification popped up. "Oh, sure. I didn't know Adam was so close with your wife. I'd like to see what's happening." Her response was polite, calm, curious, and most importantly, she wasn't angry. She wasn't suspicious. She was just aware. That night, I explained very little to my wife. "Emily might join us next time," I said casually. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. "Wait, who?" she asked. "Adam's wife," I said. "That's all you need to know for now." Her face paled. A subtle flicker of panic crossed her eyes. She tried to hide it with a smile. I noticed. And in that moment, I understood something essential. Sometimes people need to confront reality themselves. They don't need to be forced. They just need the mirror held up. The plan was simple, polite, controlled. Emily was coming over for dinner. The goal wasn't revenge. It wasn't humiliation. It was awareness. Because when someone opens the door to the past, they often forget that the past has consequences. I spent the next few days preparing. Not the house was ready. Not the food was simple. Comfort food, not fancy. I prepared myself. My tone, my presence, my calm. Because when you wield truth as a weapon, it must be steady, unshakable, and untainted by emotion. Finally, the day arrived. Emily confirmed. She would come. She would see. My wife didn't know all the details. She sensed something. A tension she couldn't name. But she agreed to the dinner, thinking it was just casual. When the doorbell rang, she rushed to answer it with her usual warm smile. Emily walked in. Pregnant, glowing, calm, confident. Not a hint of suspicion in her demeanor. Adam followed, and for the first time, I saw hesitation in him. Not fear, but the sudden realization that the world he thought he knew had shifted. Emily greeted my wife warmly, polite, smiling, I introduced myself. "Mike," she said, shaking my hand. And just like that, the dynamics of the previous night dissolved. Adam's smile faltered slightly. His eyes darted between his wife and my wife, then to me. He understood, immediately, that this was no longer a casual dinner. It was a reflection. A mirror he hadn't seen coming. And my wife. She froze. Her eyes widened slightly. I could see her thinking, what have I done? What did I invite here? Emily, calm and polite, began small talk. Questions about work, life, the baby. Casual conversation. Nothing confrontational. But every word carried weight. Every smile, every glance, every laugh subtly reminded Adam. He wasn't the only one in this story. I watched quietly, sipped my drink, observed. The tension built slowly. Not dramatically, not aggressively, but it was there. Thick, solid, unavoidable. Adam tried to joke, to laugh, to regain some comfort. But Emily's presence made every action feel different. Every laugh felt restrained. Every smile, measured. And my wife. She couldn't hide her shock. Suddenly, the energy of last night seemed absurd. The familiarity, the laughter, the soft nostalgia, all replaced by the stark reality of consequences. I realized then something important. You don't need to fight with anger. You don't need to shout, accuse, or control. Sometimes, the truth alone is enough. Because reality is sharper than words, stronger than emotion, and heavier than any fabricated excuse. That night, I witnessed two kinds of awakening. 1. Adam realized he was accountable not just for his actions but for the boundaries he had ignored. 2. My wife realized that emotional temptation is powerful, but not invincible. And me. I sat quietly, calmly, with my own sense of control. Not domination. Not revenge. Control through clarity. By the end of the evening, Emily left smiling politely. Adam followed. And the atmosphere in our house changed. The weight lifted, replaced by understanding. I didn't need to say a word. The lesson had been delivered silently. Sometimes, that's all you need. The evening started quietly. I could feel it the moment Emily walked through the door. My wife froze. Not with anger. Not with fear. Just shock. Her body stopped moving for a fraction of a second, as if she had walked into a mirror and didn't recognize her own reflection. Adam's face changed too. That confident, familiar smile from the first dinner? Gone. In its place was something far more human, uncertainty. Emily, calm and composed, greeted my wife with warmth. "Hi Sarah, thank you for having me over," she said, her voice soft but confident. Adam followed behind, and I noticed the subtle tension in his posture. He was no longer the casual, easygoing man from last week. Now, he was cautious, careful, hesitant. We all sat down. The table was set simply, the food home-cooked. Comfort food. Nothing extravagant. No distractions. Because the true weight of this dinner wasn't in what we were eating. It was in what wasn't being said. I started small talk, polite, light, asking Emily about the baby, her work, life in general. She answered calmly, politely, smiling warmly. And yet, every sentence carried a subtle reminder. A reminder that Adam wasn't the only one in this story. I watched him closely. Every glance he gave Emily betrayed guilt. Every word he tried to joke with Sarah sounded forced. Every laugh sounded hollow. And my wife. She sat frozen, glancing between them. I could see the panic flicker in her eyes. It was subtle, but it was there. The conversation flowed, slow and polite. Emily didn't need to be confrontational. She didn't need to raise her voice or make accusations. Her presence alone was enough. At one point, Emily asked casually, "So Adam, you never told me about working so closely with Sarah. And dinners together." The question was calm, simple, neutral, but it landed like a hammer. Adam went silent. Not a single word. Not a joke. Not a nervous laugh. Nothing. Sarah looked down at her plate. I could see her heart racing, her mind spinning. And I sipped my drink slowly, quietly, observing. No words. No judgment. Just clarity. Because here's the truth. Confrontation doesn't need theatrics. Sometimes, the silent, undeniable truth is far more powerful than yelling. Emily continued, speaking softly. I just think it's important for me to know where I stand, for our family, for the baby. Adam shifted uncomfortably. He avoided eye contact. He tried to smile. He tried to make light of the situation. But nothing worked. Sarah finally looked up. Her face pale, her hands trembling slightly. I didn't know, she whispered. Emily smiled softly. It's okay. I just wanted to meet the reality. The weight of that sentence hit like a wave. No accusations. No shouting. Just truth laid bare. The rest of the dinner was quiet. Every movement, every glance, every word now had a new meaning. The energy from the previous dinner was gone. It had been replaced by a silent awareness, a mirror reflecting every action, every decision. I could see Adam thinking, I should have told her. I should have been honest. I could see Sarah thinking, what have I done? And I realized something profound. You don't always need drama to teach lessons. You don't always need fights. Sometimes, clarity and presence are the strongest tools you have. By the time the dinner ended, Emily smiled politely. She thanked Sarah for the food. She looked at Adam and said, Let's go home, honey. He followed her, hesitant, his confident demeanor replaced with silent contemplation. Once the door closed, my wife turned to me. Her face was pale. Her hands shook slightly. Why did you invite her? She asked softly. I smiled calmly. Because you invited the past into our home. I just invited reality. She looked down, words failing her. I didn't need to explain more. The lesson had been delivered. That night, we sat quietly together. Not a fight. Not a shouting match. Just two people absorbing the weight of what had happened. I could see the reflection in her eyes. Understanding. Regret. Realization. And it was enough. Sometimes, silence teaches more than words. Sometimes, a mirror teaches more than lectures. Sometimes, truth delivered calmly is stronger than revenge. And that's the thing I realized that night. You don't need to punish people to teach them lessons. You don't need drama to assert boundaries. You just need awareness. And sometimes, awareness comes with a quiet presence. By the end of the night, the energy in the house had shifted completely. My wife looked at me, her eyes soft but reflective. She finally understood that emotional temptation can exist, but it's not invincible. It can be corrected, guided, and realigned, with clarity, boundaries, and calm. Adam and Emily left our home that night. But the lesson stayed. It stayed for my wife. It stayed for me. And perhaps, quietly, it stayed for Adam too. And in that silence, I realized something crucial. You don't have to win with anger. You don't have to fight with noise. Sometimes, presence, patience, and truth are enough to change everything. The house was quiet after the second dinner. The door clicked shut behind Emily and Adam, leaving a silence so heavy it almost pressed against my chest. My wife sat at the kitchen table, her hands folded in front of her. She didn't speak at first. Her eyes were distant, staring into nothing, replaying every moment of the night. I poured myself a cup of tea and joined her. We didn't talk immediately. We didn't need to. Sometimes, after storms, silence is the first and most important conversation. Finally, she spoke. Why did you do it? Her voice was quiet, almost fragile. I sipped my tea slowly, letting the warmth fill the tension inside me. I didn't do it for revenge, I said. I didn't do it to punish you or Adam. I did it for clarity, for awareness, for boundaries. Her hands trembled slightly. I didn't think it mattered, she whispered. The dinner, him being here. I thought it was innocent. I nodded, understanding. And yet, I shook my head at the same time. Sometimes, what seems innocent can still hurt, I said. Sometimes, what seems small can break trust quietly, without raising a voice. She looked at me, her eyes glistening. I didn't realize. I didn't see it from the outside. And that, I realized, was exactly why I had done what I did. Because when people live inside a memory, inside a familiar connection, they forget how their actions ripple through reality. They forget the consequences. And they forget the people who love them in the present. I told her what I hoped she understood. Adam isn't the problem. The problem is losing sight of us, of what we have now, of the boundaries that protect this marriage. She nodded, silent. Tears formed, but she didn't wipe them away immediately. She let them sit there, letting the gravity of her realization sink in. Later, she admitted something quietly. I feel guilty. Not for last night. Not for inviting him. But for letting myself feel like I did. For letting that connection pull me away, even a little. I reached out and held her hand. Guilt won't fix anything. Awareness will. And that's what happened next. Over the following days, the energy in our house shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, but undeniable. My wife became more present, more thoughtful, more mindful of the way her words and actions affected me. And I became more observant, more patient, more understanding. We spoke honestly about boundaries, about trust, about emotional temptation. I didn't lecture. I didn't scold. I didn't demand apologies. I just spoke truth. And she listened. And slowly, the tension melted. The invisible weight that had been pressing on our home lifted. I even noticed something interesting. Adam's presence seemed less haunting in our conversations. Not because he left physically, he didn't visit again. But because the emotional imbalance he had created was corrected. Because the mirror had been shown. One evening, my wife looked at me while we were sitting on the couch, the warm light of the lamps casting soft shadows across the room. "Thank you," she said. I didn't immediately respond. Not because I was angry. Not because I didn't care. But because the simplicity of that word carried more weight than any argument, any confrontation, or any dramatic gesture could have. "Thank you for what?" I asked quietly. "For showing me clarity," she said. "For helping me see where I went wrong, before it became too late." And in that moment, I realized something profound. Love is not only about passion. It is not only about shared laughter or romantic moments. It is also about boundaries, awareness, respect, and sometimes, quiet guidance. Because love, real love, protects what is precious. And sometimes, protecting it means being patient, being calm, being deliberate. We didn't speak much about Adam after that. His presence became a lesson, not a lingering temptation. A reminder, not a shadow. And my wife. She became more confident in herself, but also more mindful of what she brings into our home, into our life, and into our marriage. It wasn't about control. It wasn't about manipulation. It was about truth. And the most powerful truth is simple. You cannot change the past. You cannot erase memories. But you can shape reality. You can create awareness. You can establish boundaries. You can protect what is yours, without shouting, without drama, without anger. That night, as we sat together in quiet reflection, I felt a weight lift from my chest. Not the weight of victory. Not the weight of revenge. But the weight of peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you did the right thing. The kind of peace that comes from acting with patience, clarity, and integrity. Sometimes, people think they need to fight to assert themselves. Sometimes, they think conflict is the only way to teach lessons. But the truth is far simpler, and far more powerful. Clarity, awareness, boundaries, and quiet truth. That night, I understood something else too. Marriage is not just about sharing a home. It is about protecting the emotional space within that home. About watching, noticing, guiding, and sometimes reflecting what your partner cannot see for themselves. And when done correctly, it doesn't leave scars. It leaves understanding, growth, and respect. So yes, that dinner, the one with Adam and Emily, changed everything. It revealed what needed to be revealed. It restored what had been unbalanced. And it reminded us both of what truly matters. By the end of that week, the house felt lighter. Conversations flowed easier. Laughter returned, not forced, not fake, but genuine. And my wife and I, we were closer than before, bound not only by love, but by understanding, clarity, and trust. Sometimes, you don't need confrontation to resolve conflict. Sometimes, you don't need revenge to teach lessons. Sometimes, the quiet reflection of reality is enough. And that's the lesson I want to leave with you today. When boundaries are crossed, don't react with anger. Don't fight. Don't shout. Instead, hold up a mirror. Show the truth calmly. Let awareness do the work. And let love, integrity, and patience guide the outcome. Because in the end, the quietest actions often leave the loudest lessons. And that night, our marriage was stronger than ever. Not because of drama. Not because of confrontation. But because of clarity, truth, and respect.